Welcome back to For the Culture podcast. I'm your host, Rob Johnson, Executive Director of Multicultural Affairs here at Sacred Heart University. I am joined by an amazing and special guest who is also now part of our office in the Office for Inclusive Excellence, Dr. Freda Grant.
Hey y'all.
Insert applause. So this is our first podcast episode of the academic year, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring Freda on to talk about her role on campus, and just talk about your overall background, what brought you to Sacred Heart. I know you're new to the community.
Yes.
And for those that watch the podcast or know me personally, know that I've been here since the golden age. Like, I've been here for a long time. I just wanted to, open it up for you very quickly to give us some background on yourself, who you are, where you're from, rep your city.
I will.
And then we'll get into, the questions that we have lined up for the pod. So.
Alrighty. Well, again, Dr. Grant, but Freda is completely fine for this conversation. And I am the new Director of Institutional Equity, Support, and Compliance / the ADA 504 Coordinator.
Yes.
I feel like that's the longest job title ever,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm very proud to hold the title. And so, yes, week 3 here in the position. I'm coming from Yale University. I'm also adjunct faculty in Women and Gender Studies at Southern Connecticut State University, but it doesn't matter now because I'm here at SHU. And so I am a native of New Haven. So this is completely out of my my area, but from New Haven, I went to Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven for undergrad, where I earned my bachelor's degree in psychology and ethnic studies. And then because I love Southern so much, I guess kind of like your relationship with SHU, I went on to earn my master's degree in women and gender studies from Southern. And because those were not enough degrees, I went back and earned my PhD in public policy and social change. And I also have a graduate certificate in women and gender studies from Union Institute of University. So that's a lot. But my research interests are in social policy and looking at how policies impact members of our marginalized communities. I'm also interested in Black feminist theory and a little bit of obviously diversity, equity, so race, class, and gender, and looking at how those intersections are able to either provide us access or impede us access. And so when this opportunity to come to SHU to kind of do some of this work came available, I was like, absolutely, I think this is a great place. And I think it was also a nice opportunity for me to be able to kind of step outside of my comfort zone and really make an impact on a different campus.
No, I love that. So you talked about your various research interests and what attracted you to SHU. What was, aside from the job opportunity, what were some things that you noticed about the community, maybe our office? Obviously you went through an entire interview and search process over the past summer. And preparing to connect with us. What were some of the things that made you think to yourself, and again, it's week 3, so you're still in the honeymoon stage, right? But what attracted you to pursuing this work here? And can you tell the people a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis for our office?
Sure, absolutely. So let's backtrack. So one of the things that really stood out to me first was the office. So just thinking about the Office of Inclusive Excellence, and it's a new, right? It's pretty new. It's a new development on the campus. And so I think sometimes when things are new, people kind of shy away from it because it's in its beginning stages and it might be a lot of work. For me, I think that's an awesome opportunity to really kind of come in, make your mark, put your stamp on something, and why not start at the brainstorming phase or really laying down some foundation. So that was something that really stood out to me. And then, just getting to meet folks in the office, everyone, besides it being a very intersectional and diverse team, everyone has this passion that you can kind of hear when you're talking to folks. And, work is work, but you also want to be able to work with like-minded people. You want to be able to feel like you all are kind of spearheading the same cause. And so being able to kind of do that, and where I can have these working and learning relationships from people who are deeply ingrained and embedded in the work, is something that excites me.
That's good. I mean, and I try not to pub us up too much, but our office, I tell students all the time, you got to do things that you actually enjoy. I always say my work doesn't feel like work, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Which
Yeah.
not a lot of people can say. Their work feels like, you're watching the clock, right? Every second of the day, and having an impact. And like you mentioned this idea of being at the ground level or the foundation, of something that's important. I think that what we do here, we're in our second year as the not the multicultural center, but the office itself.
Absolutely.
To your point, and that gives us the ability to kind of see what works for not just our office, but how we can approach certain maybe challenges and obstacles. No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Do your thing.
I get slided.
No, you're good. You're good. Challenges and obstacles that we face specifically here at Sacred Heart, right? So tell us about some of the previous work that you've done, like that's kind of giving you the tools and what I mean, equipped you to be able to come in and
so
do this work.
my background is pretty diverse as well too, and so I was initially introduced to this work doing anti-sexual violence work. And so I started as like a graduate intern at Southern, pretty similar things, working with students who have been sexually assaulted. And so when you're in that role, one of the things that kind of pops out, right, now you have intersectionality, you're looking at diversity, you're looking at inclusion, compliance. During that time period was right when the Dear Colleague letter from the Obama administration came in, that kind of changed the landscape of sexual violence on college campuses anyway. And so I think that I always highlight that pinpoint as like that's what sparked that fire for me. And ever since then, everything that I have tried to do is like, how can we make things like culturally appropriate? How can we kind of fill in some of these gaps and these barriers to access? Because I feel like as a collective, we don't really look at access the ways that we should. And so we might say, well, we know that some folks are having like issues being able to reach this goal or being able to like access a particular program, but we're not looking at some of like those foundational things that lead you up to maybe not being able to reach something. And so my thing is like, how can we kind of go backtrack and put these things in where they're deeply ingrained in our programming and our services and supports and not added as an addendum. Because I also feel like when you're working with students or you're working with folks who have been harmed, they can feel when they're kind of like, all right, you could come kind of like at the back end, right? Yeah. Folks feel that. And so I'm always saying like one of the things that's important for me, and I think we should all charge ourselves with doing this, is creating safe spaces, but creating a space that's safer than the ones that we had to kind of navigate through. And so if we can right now create these safe spaces for students and have students really feel like a sense of belonging, hopefully they take that charge and do it, and it's just a little bit easier for the next group of folks who are coming.
Yeah, and that in a positive way infects the culture for
absolutely.
So
absolutely.
And speaking to that, like these topics are very societally taboo, right? So you have to handle some of the I don't know how else to put it, but worst of the worst situations and scenarios, right? And knowing how to delicately balance those issues on college campuses. So how do you get faculty, staff, and students involved in the conversation in a way that they can kind of bring down their own barriers of discomfort when we're talking about a bias, when we're talking about sexual violence, when we're talking about all of these things that for some reason people don't want to talk about on college campuses, but they happen. These are realities that they're not. It's happening somewhere, right? Your position and your role exists for a reason, right? So, and not solely is to be a punitive, role, but to also educate. So, like, what is that? How do you help them bring down those barriers?
I think the first thing is really you have to establish trust, because we're having conversations about things, like you said, that are deeply personal to folks, and folks are coming to this with whatever their particular standpoints are. And so even I think there's this trepidation about people being exposed as like a bad person, right? A bad person, and what does that look like? And so one of the ways, I think, again, it's just like establishing that trust. Like, this is a safe space where we can kind of talk and we're in community with each other. So we need to be able to learn and build and grow and connect with each other. And so even with me, for like it being week 3, one of the things that I've been trying to do is just be visible. So even if it's just walking around campus, speaking to students, so students, if and when, let's hope not, but if something ever comes up, you might not know me, but you know of me, and you've seen my presence, right? And that should hopefully just kind of build down that wall a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the next thing is, again, just understanding particular standpoints, and we don't always have to kind of go in so strong, right?
Yeah.
And so let's look at like how our standpoints have been shaped. Let's talk about biases. Let's talk about our upbringings, and how can we kind of find some common ground. And so in my most recent role, I worked with folks who had committed some form of sexual misconduct on campuses, and I did conduct awareness with them. And at the time, it was interesting because there was like conversation about, can you work with folks who have harmed people while also working with folks who have been harmed? And I was eager to kind of take that challenge on, because what you hear is that folks are saying the same things, right? Now it might look different, but when people start talking about like access to resources and supports and feeling like they aren't supported, different ways that power comes up.
Yeah.
And so what that said to me is that even though like the manifestations of it might look differently, inherently, folks are kind of working through or living through the same things. Now we know that our identities and those intersections of those can make it a little bit easier for some people to kind of work through that. But I think if you kind of come through it with like that just basic understanding, and also just looking at people like people, I think that it's easier to kind of build that rapport and build that trust for folks to start to be able to feel comfortable with you.
So you talked about building trust. You talked about making people more comfortable with you. So tell us a little bit more about like your background, like where you're from, and so like let the people in the community know that you are an approachable person, that you can
very approachable.
You know what I'm saying?
So, yes, right. Again, New Haven. Went through New Haven public school system. Again, went to Southern for undergrad and grad. And during my time there, I became a member of the best sorority in the world. I'm sorry.
No,
Gotta
go
say,
ahead.
you said
Go
tell
ahead.
the people about me.
Go ahead.
So I'm a proud member of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority.
I'm a part of the best fraternity in the world.
I mean,
right?
Like,
and you better. Go ahead.
Yes, proud member of Sigma Gamma Rho sorority Incorporated. And I think that also just highlights what our organizations and what finding like community looks like for you on campus, and how you can do that and just hit the ground running. So I was a non-traditional college student in undergrad. I have two daughters. I had my oldest daughter during the middle between like my freshman year and sophomore year of college. And so by the time I transferred to Southern, I was working. I had a 2-year-old. And so life just looked significantly different. But one of the things that I was super proud of was that I got connected to the Black Student Union on campus, got connected to the Multicultural Center, and then through there, like Greek life. And that's where I met all of my friends. We're still lifelong friends to this day, but like that's really where I saw myself begin to like blossom and grow. And you start, once you have a space on campus and you feel connected, you start spending more time on campus too. And so instead of me saying, I'm going to go to class and I'm going to go back home, I'm going to go to a program, I'm going to get engaged. That engagement also, I started to begin like to stand out a little bit more to some of like my faculty and staff on campus, and that opened the door for jobs and internships and all of those things. So I think sometimes people may not fully understand the scope of like this belonging and why the Office of Inclusive Excellence is so important. But for folks like me who would have just went to class and went home, right, it really like helps you write a different story.
Yeah, that's why I love the work that we have. Well, what we have to. What we have the ability to do with the work that we do on campus, because, being here for as long as I've been here, that experience of just coming to class and going home, I've seen that impact on students, and not only, just on students like within the community, but what association they developed when it comes to the school,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So it's like every time I'm talking to some alums or old friends, and we're having discussions about coming back to campus, it's not always in a positive light, right? Now, but I love that what we're doing is creating those spaces and long-term relationships so that students have that tie to campus and want to come back to see the MC or see Sage or see OIE. And yeah, I mean, that didn't exist before. So being able to be a part of that like community, that family is really big. So, in your overall experience, what were, some of the greatest challenges that you had as a student, being a non-traditional student, and trying to find community and being intentional clearly about finding that community? What did that look like for you?
I think the challenges were at first kind of seeking out what that community would look like.
Okay.
And I say that because, and even right like now to a certain degree, I feel like I do good moving through spaces, but it was like, who's gonna be my people?
Yeah.
So like
my crew?
Academically in class, like that was fine, but really just trying to find people that like I can connect with, and you can kind of see me as me, and then also being in spaces where people also wanted to see you do well. Right? Because
let's talk about it. No, let's talk about it.
Listen, it's a thing.
Yeah.
And kind of like what you mentioned earlier with like a job, if you're not happy about your job, you're not going to want to go to work. And you see that happening with schools too. And you see folks start like slowly trickling off because they're not happy, and sometimes like things happen on campus, but it was really trying to find like a group of people. And back then I was really ambitious. And so it was like, and programming looks so different. I feel like we say back then, like back in the days, but
if you ask this generation, this shit, right? It's crazy.
Program looked it. Oh my gosh.
No, it looked different. No, I'm with you. It looked different.
Different. So you would have flyers around, and you would, and people.
Now it's all on here, and it's,
and people were excited to go to certain programs. Like you have a why do men versus why do women program on campus, and that room was going to be packed. Now, I'm not going to say it was like a fruitful conversation all the time.
Sure.
But like it looked different. And again, it was like the multicultural center. It was all these centers. And you think about it, it was students who were running a lot of these spaces too. And so we were kind of coming in with our interests, and people just really had this passion behind some of the work that they're doing, and it absolutely shaped me. But I will say, in my 3 weeks of being here, it almost feels nostalgic because you kind of feel that passion coming again, right? And so for the back to school, I call it
the welcome back,
welcome back,
and the culture cookout,
no,
it's fine. The MC kickback, it's fine.
But something like that, right? You think about where other departments, I'm not saying here, but like other departments complain about like students not attending programs. That was a well-attended program, and it was super diverse. And I think too, like sometimes building that rapport, it doesn't always have to become so I can teach you something. Right? I'm here to provide this safe space for you, and so I'm super excited.
And I think providing the atmosphere for community is like, it's so underrated. And I think that people, especially post-COVID, being at a predominantly white institution where there's not a history of intentional programming for that. When students see it, the excitement is kind of like, it's out of the roof,
Absolutely, because it feels like home. And I joke sometimes because in my peer group, out of the state colleges, like we always refer to Southern as like the HBCU of the state colleges, right? I know the HBCU people are going to get me, but it's okay.
They're coming to get you.
We're talking about in the scope of Connecticut.
I know exactly what you mean too.
But there's a particular feel, right? There's a particular feel when you go into that campus, even to the extent that other students who are at PWIs that are,
and I was one of them,
right, that are in the area, you kind of gravitate towards there. And it just shows how you build this community even outside of your community. And it was just, whether it's through Greek life and programming and athletics and just students of color kind of looking for like these safe, comfortable spaces. And then now you have it here, and now you see where people are, and you can attribute it to, hey, remember when I was going here? And I think, we talk about community a little bit, but again, not as much because it is really important.
Yeah.
And thinking about where students are right now and just how it really aids in your development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the landscape of like college is shifting so much, right?
Yes.
So it's like for us as staff being able to kind of have that balance of like maybe what was and what was extremely important in our development that you like you're gonna need this like as you grow, but then also shifting what our traditional thought process of what building community looks like on college campuses, because again it's in 2024 and in a few months 2025, which is wild to say, it's going to look totally different for this generation. But there are still those foundational traditional pieces that like we know works, and we bring those into the spaces. So for you, what are some things that you hope to bring to the campus and or like positively change on the campus to help build community, to help build dialogue around some of the topics that you encounter on a daily basis?
And so for me, I'm also really excited about this position because I'm coming to it with a fresh set of eyes, right? And so I'm not too familiar with SHU, and so the fresh set of eyes. And so one of the things that I really want to do is kind of come with like a different type of energy, right? And with that, really thinking about how we can kind of make comprehensive policies where folks all across the board feel welcome, feel seen. And I think this is kind of where I kind of go back to that policy background because, there's multiple types of policy, right? So we don't want, I'm not really interested in symbolic policies where like this looks good and this represents something. Like I want something that is really tangible and where students can really start to see and feel like the impact and the effects of it. And so comprehensive policies, I would love to like think about different programs on particular codes of conduct that we can have. Equity, what does that look like? And then also just highlighting the fun parts of like DEI work and all of that, because I think we have conversations from like, okay, now don't do this because that's not okay, right? But also how can we find ways to kind of really embrace individuality, embrace who we are? And so I'm super excited to do that, but I'm also excited to learn. Like this school has a really big athletic department, right? So that's not usually in my my purview, but I would love to kind of again just kind of reach out, cast that net out a little bit further and really do some great work.
No, that's great. And I mean obviously we have a huge need for it because it hasn't formally existed on campus, and I think as time goes on the culture is shifting towards people, staff, faculty, students having these discussions and having these conversations where it's not becoming taboo, right?
Absolutely. And for folks, and again, like with offices like ours, sometimes people associate it with something punitive. You know, and it's always like a punitive thing, or this is in place to make somebody else feel excluded, or X, Y, and Z. Or you're saying that, this particular group or like these identities have precedence, and that's not it at all. And so I really want students, and I feel like it's already the undercurrent, really just viewing our office as a resource, right? A little tool that you I used to say put this in your toolbox, in your toolkit, but just really a resource. And if something comes up, where you can find support. If something doesn't come up, but you might have some questions or you have some ideas, just utilize us because that's what we're here for.
So you're also ADA 504.
Yes.
Certified? Is that what it am I saying it properly? Coordinator certified. So what does that look like in terms of support for members of the community with disabilities, both visible and invisible? What are some things, in your role, how do you support that population? And then also what are some things that you hope to achieve in supporting that demographic of people on our campus?
So and part of my role, I'm here as like a intermediary, secondary position. And so if students, after working with the disability office on campus, if they feel like there's still a particular need or they need some additional support or feel like they weren't supported the way that they should have been, then they can come to me and I will help them navigate that.
Yeah, and facilitate that.
Facilitate that and navigate that. And so I will say, out of all like the intersectional identities, disability is not something that I'm as well versed in, right? Because we're still learning. And so one of the things that I have like challenged myself with is certifications, trainings, but then seeing how we just day-to-day things. So I was going home the other day and noticed like the crosswalk right here. And I mean, you know, people know better, but sometimes we don't do better. But folks were parked up into the light, and like this blocks this crosswalk. And this is the only crosswalk that's here. And the first thought was like, well, what if someone is in a wheelchair? Or what if someone needs assistance walking or just time? You have these cars idling here. And so in my role, you know, if this came up, this could be something that we can kind of think through a little bit more. And so that's kind of like a resource.
No, I love that. And the work that, you know, that I've done over the past four years, I've connected with students who have a multitude of, you know, different types of disabilities, and you know, our campus is becoming more accessible. And we are better prioritizing those experiences, but of course we've got, you know, a ways to go. So yeah, it's just always interesting to hear different perspectives on. Because I'm not gonna lie, before this work, it didn't occur to me, right? In my privilege of being, you know, able-bodied in some capacities, you know, thinking about, like, for instance, in my classes now, when I'm presenting, I use the closed captions for people that might be, you know, hearing impaired or whatever. So it's like and it's a small thing, but it means the world to that individual or that group when you make that adjustment or that accommodation. So.
And like you said, like there's privilege in not knowing, right? And this, I think this is a perfect example of how you might not know something, right? And you're not knowing doesn't have to be like a negative, right? Because we could just provide like a learning curve and some space. Another thing that I was thinking about, and just from like personal experiences, how even just registering, right, with like the disabilities office and getting your accommodations, that process can be time consuming. So again, from the policy standpoint, how can we start making like a more streamlined process? And so, because for some students, right, you know, we can say, well, you have to advocate, you know, you can do this, you can do that, but that can also be a lot. And just thinking about some of the things that our students are dealing with in comparison to maybe when we were in undergrad, and maybe we just weren't vocal about it, but you know, like anxiety and all of those things are different now. And so just because someone might not have like a physical disability, we don't know. So even just finding ways that we can be more accessible and more just intentional without saying, well, this person has a disability, and so this is, because you don't know, there's a lot of like silent or hidden disabilities, and so how can we again just start making things a little bit more inclusive?
No, you're right. I mean, it's so important, because sometimes these structures are so long standing that they're not even thought of, like, you know. So it's like we are you are challenging some of these structural policies. Now, in talking about that, what are your kind of go-to, and I hope I'm not like throwing a random, you know, I hope you don't feel like, what's the word I want to use? You know what I mean? Like blindsided. But like, what are some ways that you get staff and faculty members to understand that, okay, this is how it's been done for ages, right? Structurally, the intention may not have been to cause a barrier for X group, whether it be students with disabilities or whomever. We have to change this structure in this policy due to the barrier that it creates, even though it wasn't intentional. How do you like voice that to, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you voice that to community members without them maybe, you know, taking it personal or resisting, and thinking that, you know, you're trying to maybe attack them or whatever, because it's a delicate balance that you have to, you know.
I was gonna say, like, you want me to tell my secrets, and then when I was gonna try to do it, but I'm just joking. But I think that's where relationship building comes from.
That's good.
And so, because no one wants to be told that the job that they have been doing is wrong, right? Whatever wrong is, no one wants to be told that. And so how can you start meeting people halfway? Also coming from the understanding that change is hard for certain folks. So I'm one who believes in just like allies, like when you get onto the faculty side, and the past, like any of like the liberal arts, the social sciences, I think it's a little bit easier to kind of get that buy-in. Now when you start getting into like other worlds, it might be a little bit more tricky, but in the past I've gone to like faculty department meetings, and like if you just give me like 10 minutes, right?
You just, to let you know who I am, why I'm here, and also how you can use me.
That's it. Just a few minutes. And then even for when things come up, because you might have a disclosure in your classroom. You might have a student who says, hey, this is what I'm going through, and they're looking at you for support. And so in my experience, it's usually my interactions with staff and faculty so far has typically been from there, right? Like I'm looking for ways to support students, but if something comes up and you have to kind of, provide them with some training or some guidance, that too. But again, coming from like this idea that we're just a resource, right? And we're here because we want to be here, right? All of us. And we want to like remain members of this community. So how can we remain members of this community without harming someone?
Yeah, no, that's great. So these are my last two questions.
Okay.
So what are 2 to 3, and don't feel like you have to give 3, but or like that's why I give a range. Like 2 to 3 maybe tips that you can give to just community members in general about challenging their own thinking when it comes to, again, what they've traditionally done, and now when we're introducing this thought of, okay, what you've traditionally done again is maybe exclusionary to a particular group, or creates a barrier for a particular group, or is innately biased and you didn't think about, right? So like, what are 2 to 3 tips just to get folks started in thinking about, you know what I mean?
So one of the things I always use, and I feel like at some point somebody's going to have to go and give me a check because I talk about standpoint theory so much, and they're just going to have to pay me to talk about it. But I always go back to standpoint theory, and standpoint theory comes from feminist theory, and it says, listen, our identities, we know that our social identities intersect, and we know that those intersections can impede the way that we're able to access resources, or they can, block us from resources. But what standpoint theory also says is that the way that we view the world is shaped, right, by whatever experiences and stuff that we've had because of our identities. And so for me, the way that I view the world is definitely from a lens of a cisgender Black woman, right, who grew up in a particular space and during a particular time. And now when I come across someone else, just because the way that we're looking at something might be different, it doesn't mean that either of us are wrong. We also need to be aware that there are particular sensitivities that may come into play. And so if you are not aware of something, or there is an inherent bias because of your standpoint, right? The hope is that you're not taking it like offensively, and it's like, no, this is just where we can kind of provide that space to learn from one another. And so I always just challenge folks to just kind of think about, your upbringing, think about your experiences, and think about how much your identities were shaped by that, right? And so life is going to look completely different from certain people. And so if you just kind of keep that in your mind when things come up, it's, because I think sometimes people might cause harm and they didn't intend to. There's a difference, right? And so if that's the case, again, where can we start providing that space and that learning curve? So that's something I always challenge people to kind of think about. Also, just kind of keeping us grounded in the work. Like, these issues were not built overnight. So it's not going to be like, there's no magic wand that we're going to wave and we're going to, have like these inclusive spaces overnight. And so doing what you can for one day, putting it down, and then picking it up the next day, and just knowing that you have to be able to do this work within your capacity.
Yeah, no, that's good. So what are some things that you are most looking forward to, in this role as you become a part of the Sacred Heart community? Or like, and it can be professional, personal, like what are some things that you're most looking forward to as you embark on your Sacred Heart journey?
So I am super excited about getting to learn the campus, attending more programs, really making connections with students, staff, and faculty. Outside of that, I think that there is just a lot of area for professional growth. And so this is really like, okay, you say you do policy, now do policy. Right?
You can flex that muscle a little bit. Yeah. No, that's good.
So really like being able to kind of like enhance policy. I'm excited to kind of network and collab with other practitioners of this work and really just see where this journey as a pioneer brings me.
No, sorry.
But that's what y'all say.
So before we get ready to wrap up, what are some like primary resources that you want to talk about that are under your purview? I know that you oversee BEST and a few other specific initiatives in your role. What are some things that off the bat people should know how to access that you would like for them to have, I guess just general knowledge about, and two, what are some things that what are some easy ways that they can access them through you?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say like the best way to access any resource through me is just email me, right? And we can work through, we can find resources on campus, we can find resources on in the community. The next resource I think that is great, and I think also again thinking about like building that trust and for folks to know like see what we're doing. I think the BEST resource team is awesome. I'm gonna try to remember the acronym: Bias Education Support Team.
Yeah.
See,
it's taken me a while too. But once I got it.
Right, so, and so I think the BEST team is awesome. Just thinking again, this is all voluntary, so folks kind of coming in and getting this particular training, but then also being open and willing to kind of lend themselves for like additional support when things come up. We just finished the first restorative justice session, so I think again like I think that's important for like students to see too, because like behind the scenes, like we're working and we're trying to, make sure that we're developed and trained in the best way possible to kind of suit them and support them as well.
Sure. Yeah, no, I love that because it's important for students to see people other than us in our office directly doing this work, to know that there is a concerted and intentional effort of different community members that are coming together to educate on different types of bias, different types of forms of discrimination or discriminatory harassment that exist, and how to make sure that you don't end up on the wrong side of those things, whether it be intentional or unintentional, and oftentimes it is unintentional. I love that that we have that resource, because again I always think back to my experiences, and year after year I'm getting further and further away. You know what I mean?
Some about that clock,
right? Like I'm getting further and further away. Like oh Lord, I mean our current first year students were all born in 2006, just to give you some context. But I always think back to my experience and things that we didn't have, and what we currently do have, and the amount of progress that we made, and really in a short time in forming the division and the various departments under our division. So I'm personally excited to see not only your success in the role, but like what you do in expanding it and expounding it, and making sure that people, just use us as a resource and enhance the overall Sacred Heart community and culture. Because we trust me, we've had our challenges, and I'm excited to see where it's headed in the future. So
same. And with any community, there's always going to be challenges. Absolutely. And I think like outside of those challenges, I think what's more important is like how do we come back together as a community and kind of continue to work and push the needle forward. So I'm super excited, and I'm excited to see where this journey takes me to. I got to get some shoe swag, some shoe para.
I got you. Nah, for real, I got you. Trust me.
Fridays, everybody has their t-shirts on. I'm like, I gotta get a t-shirt.
Well, at a minimum, we'll get you an MC t-shirt. That's easy. But trust me, I'm plugged in. I can get you a couple things.
You the plug.
All right, Freda. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I know you have a very busy schedule. Just being on campus. It's your third week, right? It's a Tuesday, right?
It's
your third
Tuesday,
week on a Tuesday,
Thursday.
and I got you here in the podcast
No,
room.
this is great. This is awesome. Thank you for having me.
But no, I appreciate you coming out, and thank you so much for giving your wisdom and being willing to basically tell the community how they can use you as a resource. So we will see you on the next podcast, folks.
Right.
And yeah, if you have any questions and want to connect with Freda, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Inclusive Excellence email or even the Multicultural Center email, and we'll make sure to connect you with her. But we appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Have
Peace.
a good one. Take care.